Bon, on va commencer à l'heure. Il y a peut-être des gens qui nous regardent en ligne. Donc bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue pour cette masterclass. Donc c'est, alors je me souviens plus, c'est la, je pense c'est 1, 2, 3, c'est la 4e de la série en fait, puisque il y a juste les masterclass de Rosalia et de Ariel encore à venir, hein, donc de nos 5 professeurs invités à l'ENSA Normandie ce semestre. Donc on a le plaisir, alors là il y a les 2 ateliers courts en fait intensifs qui commencent à partir d'aujourd'hui, donc celui d'Ariel Genat et celui de Rosalia Leung. Et donc c'est Rosalia qui va faire la masterclass ce soir. Donc très très rapidement, en 2 mots, Rosalia est architecte, diplômée de l'ENSA Paris-Malaquais en France à Paris, mais en fait architecte à Hong Kong. Voilà, Rosalia a enseigné assez longtemps à la HKU, qui est l'école d'architecture de l'université de Hong Kong, sur un certain nombre de thématiques dont elle nous parlera peut-être. Que dire de plus que tu encadres un atelier ce semestre qui s'intéresse aux questions des relations entre les humains et les non-humains, avec les animaux notamment, la place des animaux dans l'architecture contemporaine. Et voilà, comme j'ai pas du tout préparé, j'ai pas beaucoup d'autres choses à dire, donc je vais lui laisser la parole tout de suite et je vous souhaite une bonne conférence.
Vous m'entendez bien? Ok. Donc, bonsoir à tous. Merci Valéry pour l'introduction. Je suis très heureuse d'être avec vous pour partager mes pensées et mes projets. Mais comme Valéry, vous avez dit que je viens d'Hong Kong, j'aurais aimé de parler en chinois. Mais si ce n'est pas possible, je vais vous parler en anglais plutôt, et pour m'expliquer mieux. Et aussi comme mon atelier est en anglais, et j'ai dit à mes étudiants, on va parler en anglais tout le semestre. And yeah, so I will switch my language. I hope you can understand me clearly. And so today, my topic of the talk is about inclusive design for all. And so as Valéry has already introduced me, so I will skip my background. And I'm from Hong Kong, and I grew up in Hong Kong, and I did my bachelor in Hong Kong U, and afterwards I went to France and to do my master and work there, and then I came back to Hong Kong, and now I'm here again. So I'm always like trying to bridge between like Asia and also like Europe, especially in France. So the objectives of this talk are twofold. Firstly is to outline and evaluate the strategies that enable the coexistence of urban development and natural ecosystem in a manner that supports both ecologically integrity and urban livability. And secondly is to address why participatory design and ecological design should be considered to work together to support sustainable cohabitation between the humans and other ecological entities. So by focusing on Hong Kong's unique spatial and demographical challenges, I will share with you some of my projects, and I hope it may provide some insight to you tonight and could reflect on other cities like in France and how can we foster a harmonious relationship between the urban development and the natural world. Yes, so in the contemporary discourse on urban development, the concept of inclusive urban design has emerged as a critical paradigm. The integration of ecological considerations into urban planning is a global imperative guided by several international standards and frameworks. So for example, such as the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, which highlights the critical need for the conservation and wide use of wetlands as essential to global environmental health. Secondly, the European Union Biodiversity Strategy for 2030 ambitiously seeks to weave the biodiversity consideration into both urban and rural, and aiming to restore ecosystem and embedded green infrastructure within the cities, and in order to promote a sustainable urban environment And thirdly, an example is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So here especially the SDG 11, which emphasize the necessity of creating cities that are inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, and advocating for an approach that inherently includes environmental impact, mitigation, and preservation of natural habitats. So these international directives serve as fundamental guides, yet they require careful adaptation to local contexts to address various ecological needs and governance structures effectively. So Hong Kong, located along the southern eastern coast of China, is a is a very high density metropolis and serves as a global hub for economics, finance, trade, and foreign investment. The architecture and urban form of Hong Kong present a vibrant and layered template marked by the high-rise and high-density characteristics, as you can see in this photo by Michael Wolff. This urban form is shaped not only merely by design concepts, but is significantly influenced by geographical constraint of the region. Hong Kong has a population over 7 million people and covers a total area of around 1,100 square kilometers, which mostly is mountainous, and actually only 25% of the land is developed, leading to the high-density residential development projects. And that's why in Hong Kong, the buildings typically ranging from 40 to 60 stories. And this required more land for development near existing urban areas. So the Hong Kong government has actually undertaken extensively reclamation projects since 1980s. So overall, the urban spatial form of Hong Kong has evolved from a concentrated to a more dispersed configuration. So transitioning from a ribbon structure centered around the Victoria Harbour, which you can see here, to a concentrated yet relatively loose multicentric cluster structure divided by Natural Country Park, which you can see the greens in the middle. So 25 of the land are actually constructed and 75 of the land are dedicated to nature. And this is why we have a lot of towers and we don't have much low rise. And while compared to Huang, the city center and its suburban towns are actually tightly packed together as one agglomeration. The wetland conservation remains a continuous issue worldwide, particularly as economic incentives often drive land conversion in high-value coastal regions, overshadowing the enforcement of protective environmental policies. And this is evident in developed regions like Hong Kong. So just now, over 78 hectares of wetland are destroyed since the Hong Kong government announced the Northern Metropolis plan to develop another new city center close to Shenzhen. And although 75 of the land in Hong Kong are considered as natural reserves, these continuous expansion of urban area towards the green belt and also the wetland area has threatened the living space of wild animals in Hong Kong. Reports like wild boars walking around the city searching for food has become more frequent. Besides boars, we also have abandoned cows and also monkeys. Sometimes we go to the city center. So perhaps this is the time to reflect whether the city as an enclosure and the conventional approach of zoning and wildlife conservation are still effective. As we human populations and demand for urban area continue to grow, people and wildlife are inevitably interacting and competing for resources, which can lead to increased urban wildlife conflict. So should our city act as an enclosure at all? And how can we maintain the life of other species while expanding our city? The French landscape architect Gilles Clément suggested that all enclosure are an illusion. His idea on the planetary garden stated that the entire planet is actually one big garden and we are all gardeners. So nature is not at the surface of man. We exist within her, submerged in her, intimately associated with her. According to Clément, the work of the architect lies not in the arrangement of forms or in balance between shade and light, but in the acknowledgement of a life saved. And we can find this thinking echoes to the Eastern philosophy like Zen Buddhism, interbeing, or in a more technical Buddhist term, emptiness, is a concept that emphasizes the interconnectedness and interdependence of all beings and phenomena. So emptiness here doesn't mean nothingness. On the contrary, it suggests that nothing can exist independently or in isolation. Instead, all things and beings are part of an intrinsic web of relations and dependencies. So, the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese monk, offered a great metaphor of seeing and understanding interbeing in our life. Here I quote him: "If you are a poet, you will see clearly that there is a cloud floating in the sheet of paper. Without the cloud, there will be no rain, and without rain, the trees cannot grow, and without the trees, we cannot make paper. The cloud is essential for the paper to exist. If the cloud is not there, the sheet of paper cannot be here either. So we can say that the cloud and the paper inter-are." Sustainability in architecture addresses the negative environmental and social impacts of buildings by utilizing design methods, materials, energy, and development spaces that aren't detrimental to the surrounding ecosystems or communities. The philosophy is to ensure that the actions taken today don't have negative consequences for future generations and comply with the principles of social, economic, and ecological sustainability. Nowadays, due to climate change, there are more awareness on our impact to nature. So we start to imply construction laws such as the RE 2020 in France, and or other standard like the LEED in America, and so the sustainable movement has further led to concepts like new economy and sustainable design. However, these ideas are still bounded in a dualistic thinking of we versus you and human versus nature. We human beings need to sacrifice our needs in order to save the planet. So borrowing the concept of interbeing in Zen Buddhism, that there is no separate entity, I would like to demonstrate how participatory design and ecological design should be considered to work together. So the result is a more down-to-earth and holistic, environmentally conscious approach to design that fosters sustainable development and a better future for both the people and the planet. Design has the power to shape our world, influence our experiences, and improve the lives of individuals and communities. Currently, design literature has been bringing focus on the articulation of social relations between different actors in the design process. Like here, the SDG goal has included public participation as a means to create a sustainable future. And in participatory design is always about the act to involve all stakeholders in the design process to create a greater public value. And here I quoted Giancarlo De Carlo: "When identifying the user's needs does not mean designing for them, but designing with them." but who are them? From Bruno Latour's actor network theory, which emphasized that everything in the social and natural world, human and non-human, all interact within the shifting networks of relations, and or to Jeff Ho's design activism, a scholar from Malaysia, which examines how design professions should engage with social and environmental issues. Here I want to define the uses from human to human and non-human beings. So practicing interbeing encourages us to cultivate the empathy, compassion, and an understanding of our inherent connections to others, so we can foster a sense of responsibilities and care for the well-being of all beings and the environment. And it invites us to see beyond the boundaries of separate entities and to embrace the idea that our individual well-being is tied to the well-being of others and the world as a whole. So here I will use some of my projects as an example to demonstrate my idea of bridging participatory design and also ecological awareness. So first is a project which is bottom-up advocacy planning. Here it's the context is actually in village area in Hong Kong, and in the rural area in Hong Kong, like which you can still see there is a lot of urban settlements, but it's more dispersed near the border of Shenzhen. And in this village is marked here. It's called the Tai Kung Po village. And what is interesting in here is like there is a lot of ecological farms in this area, but at the same time there's a lot of brown fields as well, because in Hong Kong we don't have a lot of land, and so everything is very closely juxtaposed. And yeah, so the major problem here is like the public space in this village is highly paved and highly urbanized, like highly humanized, and you can see there is a lot of problems which is happening in the village where there is a brown field and also green areas which is being destroyed little by humans who live there. And there is also a separation between the farmers working in that area, like they're not living in the village, but the villagers who lived in the village, but they don't appreciate the green living. So the project here is try to bridge the two, and in order to build connection of the two separate groups, in order to enhance the landscape of this village. And so it's how to reconnect the village life with existing agricultural industry, and so as to promote the local farming, community building, and the culture and the history of the village. And the method here is using the participatory approach to invite different stakeholders. Here is the villages and also the farmers, and to try to bring every people together and to discuss a vision for the village, and how can we build an area which is more closely linked, and so that different communities, they can have more connection together through different pinpoints of architectural projects. And the global idea is to create a rural community which has 4 aspects. The first is about the planning and the public space enhancement, but it is actually connected to the agricultural local economy, and this is also highly linked to the landscape, and the landscape is highly linked to the rural culture. So in here we are trying to link tangible and non-tangible aspects in this project. And by trying to organize guided tours for villages who are not farmers, and also for public who are outside the villages, we try to bring them to have a closer look of the nature which is actually their home, but they never see it properly, and also try to organize different workshops to try to bring people to connect more to the soil, so they have more connections with nature. And at the same time, we are inviting students from the university and to do a participatory design projects with the villages to think of a public space, to think of a little projects which was built in a local farm in the village in order to make it as a catalyst to connect the farmers, the villages, and the visitors from outside together. And in this case, it's a small shed, which is also functioned as an eco-toilet. And so the story is to try to bring in local industry, which is in here, about like recycled wood actually. And in Hong Kong, we usually consider these like industry as brownfield, like brown land, and which is also existing in the rural areas in Hong Kong. But in here, we try to involve them and to participate in enhancing a farm in Hong Kong. And so by using local, like not distance material from China, and also inviting local villages and also students into the design and construction process. So we use the project as a tool to connect everyone, like different stakeholders, and in order to make it as a landmark within the village, to bring in people together for more understanding and to understand the nature context within the village as well. Second project I want to share is not a bottom-up but a more top-down public space design project, which is initiated by the government actually. And so here is a project of re-enhancement of an existing park. So this is the situation before, which is in Hong Kong. Unlike in France, the landscape architect may have a lot of say in designing parks. In Hong Kong, it's more like we choose different catalogs of products and put in the park. So you can see all the parks are basically using the same product and then they just place everywhere. And it's more as functional needs than and landscape design. And here we're invited by the government to try to put more artistic means into parks in Hong Kong. So the original situation is products from catalog, and while the trees and also the facilities is actually very separated. And in this project, we try to bring in the trees, the nature, and together with the furniture, and to try to allow, like try to create opportunities for people to see the existing nature in a more sensitive way. And again, like we try to initiate workshops with local residents. In this case, it's especially the elderlies, because in Hong Kong, usually only a lot of old people will stay in the park. Like the young people, they're very busy and they don't spend time in the park. So the main users in this park are mostly the elderlies, and we try to invite them to ask about their opinions on the park furnitures, and in order to be more elderly adaptable, and at the same time to try to open up ideas on how they can see the surrounding natures in a more sensible way. So this is the end result. Like we try to design furnitures not separated with trees and also with the plants, but trying to use the configuration so that there is more embracement. And when people are sitting, like they're not just sitting, so we are trying to make a soft connection so that people can have a closer relationship with the trees. Like even though this tree is not a very special tree, but it is still better than, yeah, we know something is here, but we never connect with them. And so here is the way to try to bridge between participation and ecological design together. And in order for us people to appreciate it more our daily life. And yeah, the third project here is participation through exhibition and events. Also by initiate like people to try to look at their daily lives in a more different way. So what is interesting about this exhibition is at the beginning there's nothing to show, and it's only empty sheets of paper. But we designed two like trolleys to, which is more like a tool to invite people to draw together in the city. And so by using this trolley, like we are organizing a guided tour to walk around. In this case, is in North Point, is in Hong Kong Island, where this is an urban area. And so along the area, we will stop by different public spaces for people to slow down and to look at their living environment in a more sensitive way. In this case, is drawing. So we lead guided tour along the city and to explain the history of the district, and also to give them different themes to observe around their daily lives, like neighborhood, birds, and in order for them to pay more attention on different things which they see in daily life, but they don't pay attention. And by the act of drawing, we try to make them be more aware of their daily environment. And in that case, it helps them to appreciate more the living environment and also to have a more deeper reflection on that. And so by designing a object, like a movable furniture, and we try to bridge the community with the city environment. And we lead them to different alleys in the city, where mostly these are back streets with no one would pay attention. And but actually there are many things going on, like there's life of the plants, and there is like different storages, and which is actually related to different functions of the shops as well. And so by bringing people to look deeper, like we allow them to have a deeper reflection on what is actually going on in the city, and to also look at their daily living environment in a new way. Yeah, so this is some of the, like at the end we also have a discussion with the participants on why do they draw like these kind of objects and what are they actually seeing, and in order to have a reflection on how we design our cities nowadays. And so now I will share a ongoing research project, which is also highly related to the studio, that I propose for the school. It's how can we extend the participation with other beings. So starting from 2021, I was doing a project called Human Public Planet Objects. So it's a very small scale research projects which we try to look at non-human beings, like how animals, insects is actually adapting to our urban environment nowadays, because city is actually designing for people, and everything that we design, like a railing, has a function, but the function is served for people, and we never really think about how other beings is actually using human artifacts, and in this case is a worm, and so how it's become actually like an ecosystem here, like while the human artifacts here is served as a catalyst. And another example is about like in Hong Kong, as we said, like it's a very dense city. We don't have a lot of trees like in Huang. So basically the birds, they are not standing in the tree, but they also stand in the buildings. And in this case, this is a facade of a high rise, and of the facade panels, like which is actually served as a resting place for the birds unintentionally. And so we are trying to study how non-human beings is actually adapting to architecture in different scenarios. And so by observing of this kind of accidental human nature interaction, we try to reflect how can we design better to accommodate, to be more inclusive in our city and also in buildings. And in this case, it's we also talk with different ecologists on their perspective on how to be more inclusive in urban design, and we develop different prototypes, but more as an object scale, like for urban furnitures and urban objects in this case, because. And so here is an example of how can we combine a signage with a homes for solitary bees. And so signage, we have a lot in the city, and it's only for human use. It's for function to let us know where we are. And but then actually it could be an opportunity for other, like the insects, to live there as well. And so we're thinking of different ways to build infrastructure, not only for humans, but also for other living beings. And so solitary bees is like is one kind of bee. Like not all the bees are living as a family, as a group, and a lot of bees, they live alone. And in this case, it's called the solitary bees. And what they need is actually they only need very small holes in order to lay their eggs. And after laying their eggs, they will be gone, and they will fly away. And then the babies, they will be hatched by themselves, and that's it. And so they don't produce honey, but they're very important for pollination. And so we further extend this idea into studying more urbanized area, like in a more concrete site. Like in this case, it's in Sham Shui Po, which is in the very center of Kowloon. And we are trying to understand how actually buildings and green areas are interacting together. Like a very small under-designed parks is actually creating connection with high-rise beside. And these indicates where we find animals, and like for example here, like the birds are actually standing on some clothes hanger along the facade, and where in the middle is a park. And so we are trying to understand how different small architectural elements is providing potentials for animals. Like here, they are not. They are here because there's food in the city, and then so this is a park in the middle, and this is the two sides of the building. And as you can see, like the buildings are very generic, and the park is also very generic. But because of this very close relationship between the human and the nature in Hong Kong, that we create kind of accidental relationships on how nature have no choice but try to adapt to the human environment. So we organize guided tours to bring people to see, like even for super rural environments, like we can still find nature here. And by understanding how nature try to adapt to us, and it's time for us to rethink how can we better design our built environment in order to be more inclusive. Yeah, so this is some of the guided tour that I organize and to explain to public this kind of urban landscape ecosystem. And the project is documented as a form of exhibition, and it is exhibited under a flyover in Hong Kong. And yeah, so it's and I will try to end this my presentation with a phrase quoted by the Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh. So when you wake up and you see that the earth is not just the environment, the earth is us, you touch the nature of interbeing. And at that moment, you can have real communication with the earth. We have to wake up together, and if we wake up together, then we have a chance. Our way of living our life and planning our future has led us into this situation. And now we need to look deeply to find a way out, not only as individuals, but a collective, a species. Yeah, so I will end here. And in order to open the floor for more discussions and questions and comments. Thank you.
Question. Oui, oui, bien sûr, les questions peuvent être en français. Les discussions
Oui,
peuvent
on
être en
peut
français.
parler en français
Voilà.
ou en anglais.
Merci. Sur le projet que vous aviez fait, pour le projet avec le banc, du coup, les arbres, ils s'inséraient dans le banc. Quand
Oui.
les arbres,
Ouais.
ils grandissent, est-ce que ça n'a pas posé un problème au niveau du banc?
Oh yeah, this is also a discussion on while we're designing it. And so we talk with the ecologists, and to understand like this tree, in order to grow to that size, it will take like more than 15 years, so it's fine.
Merci.
D'autres questions?
Du coup, je suis en cours de projet avec vous et vous nous demandez de réaliser une forme architecturale comprenant ces idées d'inclure la nature dans la ville. Est-ce que vous aussi, parce qu'on a vu beaucoup d'équipements urbains, est-ce que vous aussi vous avez déjà effectué des projets architecturaux?
No, for instance, I am more focusing on urban furniture scale. That's why I want to do an architecture scale for the project. Like, so it's not limited in furniture design and object design, and to also try to think about how can we implement it in buildings.
Merci.
Yeah.
I have a question concerning the participation of the inhabitants in Hong Kong. like, because I think participation is always like a tricky thing, and how the people take this guided tours. Like, is there a big interest, or is the interest growing over the years, or yeah?
You mean for the last project, or?
In general, for the projects you presented, where there was some participation. For example, in this project, you said that the elderly persons, they participated, and if there was like a huge interest and a lot of people came and were happy that somebody like take them in consideration. Yeah.
Yeah, I also understand your question, and in here most of the participation project is we initiated it, but during these years, especially since the political movement in Hong Kong, actually, the city, like the government, they realize we need more public participation in order to decide to make decisions. And so there are a lot of things that we cannot discuss, but to discuss how a city can be designed, like this is discussable. And so there are more requirements from the government to initiate this kind of public participation, like for public space design, and which we never have before, actually. That's why, as you can see in this project, in the past, we don't have any participation, so a contractor, he just selects products and then they just spread it into the park. And now we have the chance to discuss more and for the citizens to express themselves like their wants. And so in the context of Hong Kong, I think this is quite appreciated, actually, like to enhance more discussion in a daily living basis.
Thank you.
Jamais vu autant de questions d'étudiants. C'est incroyable.
About the BA signage project, have you seen results? Like, does it really works?
I'm sorry?
Does it really works?
What do you mean?
Est-ce que les abeilles
you mean
habitent vraiment le projet?
the signage one?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. So this thing, like, it works, but it also depends where we put it. And if we put it in the city center, it won't work because there is no, like, if like the very busy street in Hong Kong, it doesn't work. But if we put it in a park, it has a chance to work. So it's also give me a reflection on when we design something, and whether it works or it doesn't work is not only about the design, but it also about the context where we put it. And in this case, it also goes back to the idea of the interbeing. And yeah, so we need to have a more holistic approach. Like, we don't see the design as a separate thing, but how we relate to the environment as well. We have a discussion when we did this prototype, because actually this is a showcase in the Hong Kong Shenzhen Biennale exhibition. And unfortunately, we only given the site, which is near the pier at the city center. And another choice is actually to put it in a village. And we couldn't put it in a village, and in the end we can only put it in the pier. So in this case, I would say it doesn't work, because it is placed in a pier, at a pier. Yeah, but we designed it with ecologists, and they actually proposed it, like, you should put it in the village. But then again, like, the constraint make it doesn't work.
Je voudrais rebondir sur quelque chose que vous avez dit tout à l'heure, c'est que la nature s'adapte toujours. Et Et parfois, comme l'exemple que vous venez de montrer, on peut créer quelque chose spécialement pour que la nature s'y installe, mais finalement, elle peut ne pas du tout s'y installer. Bah, par exemple, j'habite en Picardie et j'ai un voisin qui est apiculteur. Et un beau matin, je me suis réveillé et en fait, on place de l'eau pour les chats du quartier. Et en fait, toutes les abeilles venaient à partir de ce moment-là tous les jours boire dans cette eau-là. Et à l'inverse, on a créé des choses dans mon jardin pour que les chats puissent s'y abriter. Mais en fait, aucun chat ne s'y abritait.
Mais les abeilles.
Oui, justement. C'est l'action que je voulais savoir, c'est du coup, comment être sûr que la nature va s'adapter et utiliser le matériel qu'on va concevoir.
I think this is something that we can never be sure, like, cause if we go back to the idea of, like, I try to share with, like the idea of Gilles Clermont and also the Zen Buddhism. Actually, they are talking about like everything is in constant movement, and so because the nature is forever changing, like we have seasons, like in this situation, because all the conditions are sufficient, so it happens. But the conditions is not just one thing. Like, okay, you put the water here, it is one element, but maybe they need other things in order for the cat to be interested. And so I would say in this case, it's like it probably needs more understanding on what in your case is like the cat like needs. Maybe they don't need water, but they need food. But you're actually also helping the bees. So instead of thinking I only do this, why don't we can be more open to the answers like from the nature, and so yeah, I would respond in this way, like we create an action and then the outcome is not as we expected, but we have a different outcome, which could be beneficial for another species, and this is also a good thing, and it also gives us more reflection on our actions and the consequences of our actions in relation to the nature. Yeah, I don't know whether I answer your question. Yeah, but I think the main thing is like, if we want, it's just like understanding the needs of the users, like maybe there needs more more knowledge on what that species they actually need in the context of your garden in order to have the result that you want. Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay.
Now, I think to go on this, I think it's everything you show us today. It's experiment.
Yeah.
It's one. So the question is it just one shot, you know, or how do you see it next? Is there? Do you see something becoming systemic about that or not, or is it still we are still at a stage where people like you try there something and it remain one short experiment for a short time, or do you think that in Hong Kong, for instance, there is signs that maybe as you on buildings or on public equipment, that step by step the idea that the birds have their place there might come to a reality, or are we still at a stage where it's only experimental?
I didn't think about whether it's experimental or is a definite answer. Like the work that I do, it's
I mean experimental in the sense that it's one experience, a punctual experience. You do one exhibition there or you try something there. And the question is the next step. Do you think that there is perspectives that, for instance, what you do with signage?
Yeah.
Would, I don't know, that the public body in Hong Kong would adopt something like that for a global signage and install 10,000 of this kind of signage? And then the story with the bees, it's not only on one little spot, but it became a massive transformation of the environment.
Yeah, I understand the question now. So it's I would say if, like, for example, this project is trying to bring more art into public park. And at the beginning, this is like, that was the first year that the government initiated that, when we are invited as the designer to do this project. And for the client, which is here, is the government. Like, for them, it's experimental. But when they see it works, because at the beginning, they even said this project is only temporary. After 3 years, we're gonna demolish it. But now it's still here. So I think everything starts with experiment. And if it's good, then people will keep it. And for this project, it stayed, and then also the next year the government invite different designers to design more in the city. So there is actually, through experiments, like, we are changing the mindset of the public and also the government parties. Yeah.
One question is, did you ask, or did the government ask some biologists to be sure for what were the needs of the animals that could come to the city and how to respond to them?
Now we still don't have this discussion in Hong Kong, actually. That's why I try to start it. And now in Hong Kong, we are still talking about constructing an artificial island, and also to destroy the wetland for new city center in order to create a very big, like Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Zhuhai city. So yeah, it's a huge debate. Like, that's why I was interested in to bring to initiate, like, we should look more into nature in Hong Kong and in the center, but not in the rural.
Yeah. But also, how do the population see this need of nature, of taking care of nature? How do they feel that? How are their concerns about it?
There are different spectrum in the city, like in terms of population. What is interesting in Hong Kong is, even though it's a very small city, but if you look at the map, we have very dense city center, which you live in a tower, but at the same time we have a lot of islands, like you can choose to live in the islands where you are in close contact with nature. So there are different types of people. Some people really don't care at all about the nature, and some are very into nature. And so yeah, we start with those small groups and try to initiate this discussion. Like, that's why we bring guided tours in the city center and try to make people look, and there's a bird here and there's a tree here, and then how it functions and why it is here, you know, in order to bring in design and education together.
Oui, je vais parler en français.
Ok.
Je voudrais revenir sur ce qu'a dit le monsieur, là, tout en noir. J'ai vu en Italie et au Brésil des immeubles avec des sortes de balcons-terrasses importants et très très densifiés et très végétalisés. L'immeuble disparaissait pratiquement sous la végétation. Et ça s'est avéré invivable du fait de l'invasion des parasites. Et donc ça semblait être une bonne idée. On voit en Catalogne, par exemple, ou à Barcelone ou dans d'autres villes, beaucoup de végétation qui pendent et ça change. Bon, il faut que le climat s'y prête, mais en fait, c'était l'inverse de ce que disait ce monsieur, c'est que les animaux se sont trop adaptés et les humains ont dû fuir.
I think here we always try to find a balance, I would say. And like now it seems like we're too urbanized. And how can we step back a little bit so it create more space for nature? And then in some cases, like nature is completely occupied, and then it is actually damaging the buildings, and then it creates a problem. So we're not trying to go to extremity, but try to find a midpoint here. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we are going to soon close, but I have a question because you have been telling us a lot of nice stories about Hong Kong, but I believe you are living in Rouen since at least 1 week. Could you share with us your first observation about the wildlife in the city and the perspective for the student to study the wildlife and the relation with architecture? First impressions?
My first impression, actually I'm quite surprised that there are a lot of birds here in Huang, like different species of Huang, not just pigeons, even in the center. And you can always hear bird sounds everywhere, like if you really pay attention. And then you start looking, okay, where are them? And sometimes they are actually hiding under the buildings. And yeah, and then it's actually surprised me like how they're hiding under the roof, and then they're making nests. Some of them are traditional buildings, and some are actually modern buildings. And I don't think a lot of French people, they pay attention to this. And I'm interested. I pay attention because I'm doing this topic. So apart from the birds, I am also quite surprised. Like there is not a lot of other animals like squirrels. Because in the UK, you can see a lot of squirrels in the park, and even in Hong Kong, we can see it, but I don't know why in Huang I couldn't see one. And yeah, but so I don't understand, and maybe this is like some ecologists can explain. And yeah, so mostly I'm trying to understand how the animals are adapting to the center. But I also realized like there is a lot of forests around, like so mostly a lot of biodiversity is in the forest, but in reflecting back the situation in Hong Kong, like which is like we have a huge confrontation with nature, like we're very close, and so it pushed me to think that if we continue to build, and then maybe even in France, you're going to face the situation like here in Hong Kong. And how can we be more, think in a more projective way? So, yeah, so that's why I'm trying to propose, like, why not when we talk about ecology, we're not talking about the village, like, why don't we talk about the city as well? Yeah.
And you mentioned something which I think is very interesting, is that the question of the traditional architecture. You know, because I already told you, I know that there is this French historian of architecture which is interested into heritage, and she's defending the presence of animals in the heritage architecture. And there is this idea that in the historic building, you have a lot of holes and fractuosities and things like that. And that there is a specific problem with the modern architecture, which is usually very flat, and where there is no space for animals. So I think the whole discussion is also related to the kind of architecture we are talking about. So are we talking about building of the last 50 years, or in a city like Rouen where you have a lot of old buildings with a lot of holes, and so there is a discussion around what kind of architecture we are talking about.
Yeah, so I don't limit the students to only look at one kind of architecture. Like we try to look at the first step of the studio to try to mostly just simply walk around the city and to find how the different corners that the birds or the wildlife, the wild plants are actually trying to grow, and hopefully in the end of the studio we can come up with a conclusion.
Est-ce qu'il y a une dernière question?
Yeah, I'd like just to say as an example, the population of sparrows, c'est les moineaux en français, has decreased in Paris from the last 30 years for about 70%. They have almost disappeared from Paris because in the last 3 decades, people have just invested the cellars of the buildings, the last stories of the buildings that just were under the roofs, used for habitations, and then people bought their space and transformed that into apartments. So the sparrows did not have any more place to live or to nidify, and they've gone. That's an example of how architecture, without knowing what are the implications of changing things in architecture and how we invest and occupy the city.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like maybe it's only one small design gesture, and it have huge consequences to, like in this example, like the sparrows.
And the last, there's a little, I'll say it in French, or maybe. In Brazil, we ask people, why did the chicken enter into a church, into the church? Because the door was open. So just that's the answer. You have to leave the doors open for the animals can come, if you want.
Pas d'autres dernières questions? On s'arrête là? Eh ben, on remercie à nouveau Rose pour sa passionnante introduction et on lui souhaite un très bon semestre à l'ENSA Normandie.
Merci beaucoup.
Et merci pour votre présence et pour vos nombreuses questions. Bravo.